Welcome to another deep dive. We're really getting into it today with Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah, this book's a classic. And it's not just like some fluffy self-help stuff. This is Nobel Prize-winning stuff about how our brains work, how we make decisions.
It really gets you thinking, right? Like, why do we make some of the decisions we make? Kahneman talks about these two systems, System 1 and System 2.
Right, and it's like we're always using one or the other, or both. System 1 is like our autopilot, super fast, intuitive.
It's like when you swerve to avoid something in the road. You're not really thinking about it.
Exactly, you just react. Now, System 2, that's our more analytical side. It takes effort.
Like when you actually have to sit down and figure out those complicated tax forms.
Or if you're trying to choose between two really good job offers, weighing all the pros and cons,
Yeah.
that's System 2, working hard.
But Kahneman says System 1, as great as it is, can lead us to make some pretty irrational choices, right?
Oh, yeah. He calls them biases, like little mental shortcuts that can trip us up.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example of one of those biases.
Well, think about anchoring. Have you ever been, like, totally shocked by the first price you see on something?
100%. Happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
Especially with cars. Like, how can they even ask that much?
Right. But here's the thing. Even if you know it's way too high, that price is now stuck in your head. So when you see a lower price, even if it's still a lot, you might think it's a good deal because you're comparing it to that crazy first number.
So that first number, it's like messing with my head even if I know better.
Exactly. That's anchoring. Your brain latches onto that first piece of information, even if it doesn't make sense.
That's kind of sneaky. And there's a whole bunch of these biases, right? Just lurking in our subconscious, influencing our decisions. It's kind of like we think we're in control, but our brains are playing all these tricks on us.
Right. And the thing is, these biases, they don't discriminate. It's not like,
Right.
oh, I'm too smart to fall for that.
So even like someone like Warren Buffett, with all his experience, he's got these mental blind spots too.
Even Warren Buffett. Kahneman talks about this thing called the illusion of validity, where experts, especially in fields like finance, think they can predict the future better than they actually can.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better about my own track record with picking stocks.
Yeah, we all have those moments where we're a little too confident, thinking we know more than we do. Overconfidence bias in action.
So what do we do about it? Like,
Hmm.
if we're naturally prone to these biases, are we just doomed to make bad decisions?
Not at all. That's the beauty of it. Once you understand how your brain works, you can start to outsmart it. It's not about being perfectly rational all the time. It's about recognizing those moments when System 1 is about to steer you wrong.
And then what? Like, put on the brakes and call in System 2 for backup.
Exactly. Kahneman talks about having a risk policy for big decisions. Instead of just jumping in, take your time, sleep on it, think it through.
So, like, engage that slower, more deliberate thinking.
Right. Or let's say you're in an argument and you realize you're only looking for information that supports your side. That's confirmation bias at work.
Oh, I know that one well.
We all do. But if you can catch yourself, you can try to look at the situation from a different angle.
So knowledge is power. Knowing how our brains really work gives us more control.
Exactly. And Kahneman, he doesn't just point out the problems, he dives into some really fascinating solutions. Like, have you heard of prospect theory?
Ooh, tell me more.
Well, it basically says that we feel the pain of a loss way more strongly than we feel the pleasure of a gain.
Oh, for sure. Losing $50 is way more memorable than finding $50.
Exactly. And that means we're often willing to take bigger risks to avoid a loss, even if it means potentially losing even more.
It's like we're hardwired to avoid those negative feelings, even if it doesn't make logical sense.
Right. And this has a huge impact on everything from how we invest to how we negotiate.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. How does this affect our relationships?
Well, think about it. Prospect theory suggests we might be more likely to stay in a relationship that's not working, just to avoid the pain of a breakup.
Because we're so afraid of that loss.
Exactly. Even if, in the long run, we'd be happier moving on.
Wow, okay. I'm seeing this everywhere now. This is like relationship advice disguised as behavioral economics.
And there's more. Kahneman also talks about the planning fallacy, which I'm sure we've all experienced.
Oh, yeah, that thing where you think a project will take a week and cost $100 and it ends up taking a month and costing $1,000.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to be optimistic, so we tend to underestimate how long things will take and how much they'll cost.
So how do we avoid that trap? Should we just like triple our estimates for everything?
That's one way. But Kahneman suggests a more interesting approach. The pre-mortem.
A pre-mortem, like for a project. What's that?
It's like a mental simulation where you imagine your project has failed and you try to figure out all the reasons why.
So you're basically planning for failure.
In a way, yes. By anticipating those potential problems beforehand, you can come up with solutions and avoid them altogether.
That's brilliant. So instead of just focusing on what could go right, you're also thinking about what could go wrong.
Exactly. It helps you make a more realistic plan.
Okay, I love that. The pre-mortem, I'm adding that to my mental toolkit. What other gems does Kahneman have in store for us? So we've talked about all these biases and mental shortcuts, and I gotta say, it's a little overwhelming. Like, how do we actually put all this into practice? Is it just a matter of, like, thinking really hard about every decision we make?
Well, it's not easy, that's for sure. Our brains are wired to take those shortcuts, those easy routes. But one of the biggest takeaways from Kahneman is the importance of just slowing down.
Okay, slow down. Easier said than done, right? The world's not exactly set up for
I
that.
know, right? But even just taking a few seconds, a few breaths to think before we react, that can make a huge difference.
So it's like mindfulness, but for decision making.
Exactly. The more present we can be in those moments, the less likely we are to just go with our gut, which isn't always the best guide.
In Kahneman's work, it's not just about helping individuals make better decisions, right? Like, his ideas have had a big impact on, like, policy and stuff, too.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things I find so fascinating about his work. It's influenced so many different fields. Like, have you heard of nudge theory?
Yeah, I think so. It rings a bell. It's about, like, subtly influencing people's choices.
Right. So instead of like banning something outright, you make it a little bit harder to do, or you make the healthier choice the easier option.
Oh, like putting the fruit at eye level in the cafeteria so people are more likely to grab that than a cookie.
Exactly. Or automatically enrolling people into retirement savings plans unless they choose to opt out.
Which, honestly, most people are too busy or lazy to do, so they end up saving more money almost by accident.
That's the idea. And it's all based on Kahneman's work on how we make decisions, how those biases play out in the real world.
It's kind of like we're hacking our brains for good, you know? Using these insights to create systems that help us make better choices, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just nudges either. Kahneman's work has influenced everything from how we design warning labels to how we approach behavioral economics.
It's incredible to think about the impact one book, one person's ideas can have. And it all started with, like, trying to understand why we make such irrational decisions sometimes.
Right, and I think that's what makes Thinking Fast and Slow so compelling. It's not just a bunch of theories, it's about us, about how our minds work and how we can use that knowledge to make better choices, live better lives.
It's a lot to think about. Or maybe I should say it's a lot for System 2 to process.
There you go. And that's the key, isn't it? Knowing when to engage that slower, more deliberate thinking.
Well, you've definitely given me a lot to chew on today. I think I need to go back and reread Thinking Fast and Slow with fresh eyes now.
Me too. It's one of those books you can come back to again and again and always find something new.
It's like a workout for your brain. And on that note, we'll let you go. Give your System 2 a little break. But don't let it rest for too long. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the world of ideas. Until then, keep those brains thinking and be sure to check your biases at the door.